welcome to episode 3 of the Retro Baseball Game Challenge, where I'll be playing every old baseball video game I can get my hands on. In today's episode, we'll be playing Super Baseball Simulator 1000. We'll be playing both the original NES version and the Switch Online Super NES version. I also wanted to use this game as an excuse to test out the Switch Online Super NES controller that I haven't really used at all since it came out. I've never heard of these games before, but I'm also excited to try games from before my childhood, which began kind of with the N64. There were honestly dozens of baseball games from the 80s and early 90s to pick from, and I plan to play as many as I can for this challenge, so I hope I picked a good one to start, but let's find out. So when turning on Super Baseball Simulator, we are once again treated by a very catchy intro song, and then are given 3 simple options: Exhibition, Season, and Edit. This is pretty much as simple as an opening menu as I think we'll ever see. So let's dive right into an exhibition game and see what we're working with. I was presented with 3 leagues to choose from, some basic gameplay options, and that was it. I of course went with Pittsburgh. Just know that these are not the real MLB teams, as there is no official license here, and there are only 18 teams in total. We are greeted again by a little intro music and jump right into the gameplay. Spoiler alert, my first attempt at playing this game was pretty much a disaster. I got mercy ruled after a few innings, which graciously put me out of my misery. Everything I was doing was wrong. Throwing to bases without anybody standing there, missing what should have been easy flyouts. Pitching essentially became batting practice for the computer team, all while not being able to do all that much on offense myself. This was a mess of a first attempt at playing this game. Some of it was my lack of knowledge on how the game was played at first, but a lot of it is not, which I'll let you see as we dive a bit deeper in this episode. There were honestly a lot of issues I had with the controls right out of the gate. The pitching was strangely unresponsive. If you're not familiar with these retro baseball games, you basically control the speed of the pitch by pressing up or down on the control stick or control pad in this case, and then the curve of the pitch by pushing left or right either before or after you release it, and then some combination of those. For some reason, this was very inconsistent, which would lead to some pitches getting clobbered by the computer, even though I was trying to do something else. Either pitchers would tire out easily and I didn't notice or something, but it just never got a great feel for it. But this pales in comparison to my complaints with the fielding, which, oh man, fielding was awful. Easily the weakest part of the gameplay for me, and it only slightly improved as time went on. If you can't tell, the only way to catch a fly ball is to make an educated guess on where it's going to land. If the player icon holds his glove up and kind of stands up, then you know you're underneath the ball. The issue is the detection for the spot is so small, and you'll miss plenty of fly balls even though it looks like you're about to be lined up correctly. So that means running with your ungodly slow fielders to the wall constantly to chase balls that should have been outs, and this cycle repeats and really drags down the gameplay. I mentioned earlier as well, you are very capable of throwing the ball to a base with no one standing there, which is not something I think I've ever seen in a retro baseball game, ever, even modern ones and older ones. It just feels like a mechanic that shouldn't be there if no one's actually covering the base. Now onto hitting. It's a touch better than other aspects of the game, but not by much. You can move your batter anywhere, up and down, left or right, in the batter's box. Basically, I just tried to mirror whatever side the pitcher was standing on. Hitting is mostly about timing, which is a lot of guesswork here. A bit too much, if you ask me, as pitches were running well into the triple digits. I never really adjusted to the speed of the fastballs, and mostly would try to sit on something slower. But since I was mostly guessing on what pitch was coming, it kind of takes a lot of the fun out of the equation. I also didn't like how many foul balls there are. The gameplay is decently quick overall, which is nice, but it can get bogged down with a ton of foul balls, and outside of a pure simulation style baseball game, there really is no need to have this here. It just gets old very quickly. So anyways, after that disaster of a first game, I played a few more and was adapting to the controls a bit better. I was still misreading a ton of hits and not really pitching all that well, but I was making way less mistakes overall and games were way more competitive. Also, something weird happened in the 7th inning. The scoreboard flashes lucky in bright rainbow colors for no reason. I think this is something that we'll find out happens in a lot of retro baseball games, but this was my first time discovering it here. It turns out that everyone gets a huge stat boost in the 7th inning. I actually kind of like this. I don't know why, but it gave the game a bit more personality. Even with games going a little more smoothly now though, I still thought I must have been missing something with the controls, but after looking up the game's original manual, not really. This was clearly going to be a learning curve throughout the entire process, and I was not having that much fun. Well, that was until I discovered Ultra Play. When looking at the manual, I saw all these additional options for something called Ultra Play, which essentially allows you to use power-ups when hitting and pitching, and also when fielding by making rocket jumps, hyper throws, and super catches. Okay, well, what was I missing? How do you actually activate this? Well, it turns out if you select any of the 6 teams from the menu in the league at the bottom of the screen, this changes the gameplay entirely by giving you the ability to power up your pitcher and batter at any given point. Each time you use a power-up, it takes away from your team's total allotment at the bottom of the screen. Depending on how many points you selected for each team to use, you can either spam these power-ups throughout the game or use them wisely at key moments, which I think is how the game was intended to be played. This changes everything. Well, now the hitting, pitching, fielding, and base running controls are all pretty terrible, so I guess it doesn't change everything, but it changes a lot, and now there are some extra things that are actually fun, and in turn makes the gameplay feel completely different. Now that you know the premise with the game's Ultra mode, I decided to edit a team with every single Ultra power-up in the game just to show them all off, and warning, there are 35 of these in total, which is kind of crazy. I'll place a screenshot here for reference, but here we go. There's the Hyper Hit, Missile Hit, Tremor Hit, Bomb Hit, Shadowless, Meteor Hit, Squirrel Hit, Invisiball, Spinner Hit, Leaf Hit, Shadow Hit, Hyper Run, Freak Hit, Dizzy Ball, and Orbit Hit. Now on the pitching side, there's the Fireball, Stopper Ball, Phantom Ball, Snake Ball, Speeder Ball, Ninja Ball, Iron Ball, Spark Ball, Photon Ball, Jumper Ball, Spiral Ball, Zigzag Ball, Tremor Ball, Multi-Ball, Floater Ball, Change Up Ball, Fade Out, Lotta Ball, Warp Ball, and finally the Question Mark Ball. It's hard to tell exactly what all of these do at first, but again, the game's manual has a nice detailed breakdown of all of them. It's kind of wild to see them included here, and I honestly wish the game went all in with this Ultra mode instead of messing with any of the simulation aspects of the game or burying the Ultra mode to that third set of teams. For a game called Super Baseball Simulator, it doesn't do a great job with the simulation gameplay, but this might also just be a reference to the ability to manage games instead of playing them. Not sure. But anyways, I wish the focus on Ultra play would have been heightened and the gameplay would have reflected that versus being this awkward hybrid of a game that isn't exactly sure what it wants to be or is trying to do too much. After playing the standard and Ultra baseball games, I decided it was now finally time to try out the second game mode, Season Mode. While I only played a 5-game season to test this out, I was surprised to see a decent amount of stat tracking here. The game keeps track of the top 30 hitters and batters, as well as your own team stats, which is something I don't think we'll see from every game in the Super NES era, but we'll see as we dive deeper into these videos. Something I noticed as well is you can actually choose to manage games instead of playing them. I found this incredibly boring, but I guess it's nice to include this. If someone were to attempt an entire season, you could skip some games if it grew tedious, which I promise you the gameplay here probably will. Even though the gameplay again is the same in season mode, I think if you really messed with the skill level and found the right amount of Ultra points to use in each game for balancing purposes, there is some redeeming value here. I also found it nice that the game has more background songs in season mode and even has some special intros for the beginning and end of a season. Something that is truly next level though is you can actually set up a 6-team user-controlled season where each player keeps a different team and then you can play against one another. So let's say you and a few friends wanted to keep track of your stats and play against one another for an entire season. You can actually do that. I gave huge props to the developers to include this, as I can't recall any baseball game I've ever played to have this feature, let alone one from something that came out in 1991. Before we move on to the final grades, I thought it would be worthwhile to take a look at the NES version of the game, titled Baseball Simulator 1000, to see if there's anything worth talking about. I was surprised to discover that this is pretty much the exact same game, just a slightly less attractive presentation, being that it is on a less powerful console. It plays roughly the same, and there isn't much to talk about since it's basically just a worse looking version of the old game. There was a space-themed baseball level that wasn't in the Super NES version, so that's the one I chose to play when testing this. I will say it's kind of disappointing that these games are so similar. It makes the Super version of the game feel like even more of a missed opportunity to kind of tweak and clean up the gameplay into the next generation. Also, the speed of the gameplay in the NES version actually felt better and a little more responsive for what it's worth. But the presentation trade-off wasn't worth playing it over the Super NES version. Alright guys, now time for our grades. Hitting was just kind of your standard affair here with way too many foul balls. The Ultra Play is really the only thing that makes it kind of interesting, with some ridiculous power-ups to try out, but it doesn't make up for the very inconsistent hitting results, and it's just hard to get a great feel for capturing the hitting. And that's basically the same thing for pitching, except the pitching is even more frustrating because it can be somewhat unresponsive at times, which combined with terrible fielding controls makes for a pretty miserable pitching and defensive experience. Again, this is only saved a little bit from the power-ups in Ultra mode. Other than the super simple menus on the game's opening screen and the awful edit mode controls, I actually kind of liked the presentation here in game. I don't know if it was great for the era or not, but having all the different graphics for the power-ups was a lot of fun, and a lot of the music and sounds are actually pretty solid here. In terms of replay value, this is probably the best aspect of the game. There's a decent amount of depth to the game modes. I mean, God help anyone that plays this for an entire 162 game season, but it's there. And the ability to edit teams and such is a nice touch, especially having a 6-player season mode, which seems well ahead of its time. My overall enjoyment, it's kind of middle of the road here. As you can tell, my initial reaction to playing this game was terrible. But after adapting to the controls and messing with the Ultra Play settings, I did find some enjoyment here. So in the end, I really wanted to like Super Baseball Simulator 1000 more. It does have some cool features like that 6-player season mode I just mentioned, a ton of cool power-ups, and the ability to edit almost everything. Where it falters somewhat massively is in the baseball gameplay itself. Which is incredibly frustrating even for a game from this early generation. I obviously expected a simple baseball arcade game, but the pitching, fielding, and running mechanics, which is a big portion of the gameplay, is all mediocre to sometimes terrible. Hitting is semi-competent at times, it's just too random to be all that fun either, so again, you just never get a great feel for things. The only true standout here is Ultra Play. Because of this, the game would have been fun to play locally for at least a few games, just to see what all the power-ups are, and I think it would have been certainly fun as a kid in the early 90s, but it ultimately doesn't hold up all that well, and it'll be a C-tier game for me. Doing some research for the previous episode for this challenge, episode 2, where I looked at the first Ken Griffey Jr. game for the N64, I was surprised to find a licensed baseball game that I've never heard of, and that was Mike Piazza's Strike Zone, which was released about a month after Ken Griffey Jr., so that should give us a good point of reference for the next episode. But yeah, that's what we'll be playing next, and I'll be going into that episode completely blind. So make sure you subscribe to be notified for whenever that episode drops. I know these videos haven't been getting a ton of views, but I enjoy making them, so stay tuned for the next one. Peace out.